Welcome to Leadership and Inner Clarity, Navigating Pressure, Presence and Performance, our podcast series where we explore the mental, emotional and psychological dynamics behind modern leadership and how to reconnect with yourself while leading effectively. I'm Falco Wiskirchen, leadership coach and naturopath for psychotherapy with over 12 years of experience supporting leaders in their professional and personal challenges. Today's topic is Burnout is not a sudden collapse, the silent erosion of energy and motivation. Burnout rarely arrives dramatically. It doesn't usually show up as a breakdown in the middle of a meeting or a sudden inability to get out of bed. Most of the time it enters quietly. So quietly in fact that many leaders do not recognize it until they are already far inside it. If you're listening to this episode, you may already sense that something isn't quite right. Not necessarily wrong, just off. You're still functioning, still performing, still reliable. But something feels flatter than it used to, less alive, less meaningful. Today I want to talk about burnout in a way that goes beyond cliches and extremes. Not as a dramatic collapse, but as a slow erosion of energy, motivation and inner connection. Because burnout is not the opposite of strength. It's often the result of too much strength held for too long. Let's begin by clarifying something important. Stress and burnout are not the same thing. Stress is an activation state. Your system is mobilized, alert, engaged. There's pressure but also a sense of movement. Burnout, on the other hand, is what happens when activation no longer resolves. And the system stays mobilized for so long that it begins to conserve energy instead of generating it. From the outside, a stressed leader looks busy. A burnt-out leader often looks calm, sometimes even detached. Inside, however, the experience is very different. Many executives describe burnout not as exhaustion, but as a loss of inner color. They say things like, I don't feel deeply tired. I just don't care the way I used to. Or, I'm doing everything right, but none of it really reaches me anymore. This emotional flattening is one of the earliest signs of burnout, and one of the most misunderstood. Because from a leadership perspective, detachment can look like professionalism, like resilience, like emotional control. But internally, it's often the nervous system beginning to shut down unnecessary channels in order to survive. Burnout develops in stages, not formally, not neatly, but experientially. It often starts with over-engagement, high commitment, high identification with performance. You care deeply, you give a lot, you take responsibility seriously. And because that works, because it brings success, it becomes the default mode. Rest becomes optional. Recovery becomes inefficient. Listening to early warning signs feel like weakness. This is why many leaders ignore burnout signals. Not because they are unaware, but because they've learned to override discomfort. Headaches, sleep issues, irritability, a growing sense of inner pressure, all of that gets normalized. It's just a phase. It'll calm down after this quarter. I just need to push through. But the nervous system keeps the score. When activation doesn't resolve, the body looks for another strategy. And that strategy is often emotional withdrawal. not consciously but subtly. You might notice that joy feels muted, that wins feel less satisfying, that setbacks hit harder than they used to. Motivation shifts from inspiration to obligation. You don't stop working, you stop feeling nourished by the work. And this is where burnout becomes dangerous, because it's quiet. There is no obvious crisis forcing change, just a slow narrowing of inner life. Let's pause here for a moment. As you listen, take a brief moment to check in with yourself, not intellectually but physically. Notice your breath, your shoulders, your jaw. No need to change anything, just notice. That moment of awareness is important, because burnout thrives in disconnection, from the body, from emotion, from inner signals. One of the most painful aspects of burnout for higher performers is the loss of meaning. Not the loss of purpose on paper, but the felt sense of why something matters. You still know what you're doing, you just don't feel connected to it. From a psychotherapeutic perspective, this loss of meaning isn't philosophical, it's physiological. When the nervous system is chronically overloaded, it prioritizes survival over depth. Curiosity fades, creativity narrows, long-term vision collapses into short-term functioning. This is why burnout leaders often become more reactive, more controlling, or more withdrawn, not because they have changed as people, but because the system is conserving energy. Another early sign of burnout is emotional numbness. This can be confusing, especially for leaders who are used to being decisive and composed. They say, "I'm not anxious, I'm not depressed, I just feel neutral." But neutrality is, in this context, not balance. It's disconnection. The nervous system has learned that feeling deeply costs too much, so it turns the volume down. And this can show up in leadership as reduced empathy, impatience with complexity, or a preference for quick solutions over nuanced conversations. And at home it often shows up as emotional distance. You are there, but not fully present. Burnout doesn't just affect performance, it affects relationships. And because many leaders measure their health by output, they often miss the relational cost until it's pointed out by someone else, a partner, a colleague, a child. This moment, when burnout becomes visible through relationships, is often deeply unsettling, because it challenges the belief that as long as I function, everything is fine. But functioning is not the same as living. From a nervous system perspective, burnout is a signal that regulation has been missing for too long. Not relaxation, regulation. Regulation means moving between activation and rest fluidly. Burnout means being stuck, either in constant low-level activation or in collapse masked as calm. And this is where many well-intentioned solutions fail. More productivity tools don't fix burnout. Better time management doesn't restore meaning. Motivation techniques don't address exhaustion of the system. Burnout recovery begins with understanding, not fixing, with recognizing that what you're experiencing makes sense, that it's not a personal failure but a systemic adaptation, and that adaptation can be renegotiated. This doesn't require quitting your role. or stepping away from responsibility. It requires rebuilding the relationship with your own signals, learning to notice before you collapse, learning to respond before numbness becomes the norm. Before we close, I want to speak directly to you if any part of this episode resonated. If you recognize the quiet exhaustion, the emotional flattening, the loss of inner connection, you don't need to wait for a breakdown to take this seriously. Burnout is most effectively addressed early when awareness returns. If you'd like support in understanding where you are in the process, I invite you to book a free initial consultation via my website. This is a confidential, pressure-free conversation where we explore your situation together and clarify what kind of support would generally help, whether through leadership coaching, therapeutic work, or a combination of both. You don't need to label yourself as burnt out to reach out. You only need to notice that something wants attention. Thank you for listening. Take a moment before moving on with your day. And I'll meet you again in the next episode. And you can find more valuable insights in my other podcasts. Feel free to check them out. And please remember, be good to yourself and take care. You are important. See you soon. And of course, I would be delighted if you'd like to support my work by subscribing, liking and sharing so that my podcasts reach other people I would like to help. Thank you.